Hello, how's it going? Today I'm going to do a music video, um, and this one's about Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is probably one of my favorite bands, top five at least. I've even got the shirt on. Hey, hey, hey. My favorite song. We'll get into that later. So I got into Iron Maiden probably a little bit late. I was late to the game. I was late to the whole like getting really into metal until I was like late teenager. So this would have been around 98, 99. And it just sort of was a flood with me. I think in the middle of the 90s, I was a young teenager, and I was into heavier things like relatively heavy things like a lot of the grunge things like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and it's sort of a natural progression if that's what's going on, right? That's what's current. You kind of like, okay, well, who do these guys like? And you kind of go back. Some of it's okay. I'm not completely into grunge. Like, sort of the bigger names are good. I don't get bands like Mudhoney or, um, uh, shoot, I forget the name. Um, like a lot of those Seattle bands that didn't make it to those upper echelon. I've listened to a lot of them. Um, they're okay. They tend to be very samey. They don't tend to, they don't tend to branch out. So uh, then I started going back and listening to things like Black Sabbath, right where it started off, and then you're like, okay, and then you go into, and there's a natural progression within metal to listen to that, and Black Sabbath I always really liked, I still love it. I'm going to have a hard time dealing with a video like that because it's too much. But then getting into Judas Priest and then getting into Iron Maiden. I really enjoy Iron Maiden and Judas Priest because it doesn't seem like they ever really sold out in the sense of like if you look at like a band like Def Leppard where they had a couple good albums that were metal-ish and then they just sort of dropped the whole metal act and was just chasing the market rather than letting the market come to them. And this is why a band like Iron Maiden is so popular is because they stuck to their roots. They stuck to who they are. They stuck to what they wanted to do, the style of music that they played. There is a bit of play in it. They did evolve over the years, probably becoming a bit more progressive in their metal approach. But largely, they, they they never benefited from any attention on the radio, on MTV. They had a couple of songs that made it onto MTV occasionally. You would never see them. And they're like one of the biggest underground bands in the world, yet obviously selling tens of millions of records, hardly underground. So it's really like they're a giant cult that never really gets talked about unless you start digging for them. And if you're into harder music, Iron Man is just like it's just a wealth. And then you can listen to bands like Judas Priest and many others. Warrant their own videos, so I won't go too deep in them. But I just every album that I started listening, I was like, this is so awesome. And it doesn't feel like it is sort of manufactured. It feels like the songs are real and the skills that these guys have are just so great and it just looks like a lot of fun and they're making money hand over fist, and if you go to any concerts they're a lot of fun. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't really like metal that gets too dark. I have depression. I don't need any more dark shit in my life. If you listen to some of these, like they're exploring uh themes, there's very little in the way of love or anything that you would consider pop music. There's very little about sex. There's very little about drugs or drinking. It's really just kind of exploring literature. That's a common theme of them is that, especially Steve Harris, he wants to. There's an old saying: if you want to write a new movie, go read an old book. That kind of thing. Um, so I'm going to go through them, at least the five hits, and then some deeper cuts that you need to learn. So the hits are a relative term, I know, since nothing really gets played on the radio. If you were going to listen to something on Spotify, these would end up on some metal mixes or something like that. they're not going. Obviously, they're not going to be played a lot on the radio. And if they do end up being played on the radio, some of these songs are going to be the ones you're going to hear. It's a really good place to start. This is what 5 songs to start with, and then some deeper ones that maybe some people wouldn't know unless they know the whole discography. So 5 hits. The first one I'm going to talk about is Hallowed Be Thy Name. There are tons of hits that I'm probably not going to be talking about that are actually bigger than this, but this to me is one of the first just epic songs of theirs. And a lot of their songs can be, well over 6-7 minutes. And Hallowed Be Thy Name is very creepy. It starts off slow and then it just starts boom. It just hits you in the face. And it's about a guy who has been condemned to death, and it's his last moments on earth, and it's all the thoughts racing around. God has abandoned me. All just being scared that this is going to be it for him. That does his soul live on? That kind of thing, and it's just the panic of it. It's a very dramatic piece of music. I love it. This is where Bruce's voice is at its best. So I love this song. I know it gets played a lot, but it's a really great place to start. So the next song I'm going to do is you probably have heard this. If you're into sort of harder rock, you probably have heard this. This is the most famous song of theirs is The Trooper. It's got a great guitar riff, and it's about Charge of the Light Brigade during the Crimean War. And basically, it was just a bloodbath. And it's basically from the point of view of a soldier or the cavalry, and they're just getting shot down by the Russians. And it's sad. It's really energetic. You really feel like you're in a. I don't know what it's like to be in a battle, but you're really in the. It's really racing. It gets your heart pumping, and it's a really fun song. Guitars on it are, they're really great. And if you don't listen to it too much, I can always come back to the song to kind of get me up. I go out of my way generally to avoid songs like this, not because I don't like them, it's just because I don't want them to get old to me. I want them to maintain that feeling that when I first heard it, and you're just blown away by it. And I'm just going back and thinking wow, where was this my whole life? That kind of thing. So the third song is from the next album is called Aces High. Now, Aces High is probably one of their most famous songs. It's usually something they start a concert off with. Now, if you'd gone to, I forget the name of the tour. I saw them in Chicago when we lived out there. This was sort of a greatest hits tour. There's the Legacy of the Beast, I think it was called. I don't have the t-shirt there, but it's so if you see this guy right here is Eddie, and he's sort of their mascot. He's sort of in everything, and whatever the theme of the album is. So one of the last album, really latest one, he's a samurai, and last one he's a Mayan king sacrifice. I don't know what his specific title was in that. He's been a mental patient. He's been a serial killer. He's been a cyborg. He's been a pharaoh. It's really fun. And so anyway, Aces High. Usually it's about a dog fight, and not a dog fight, the airplanes in the World War II, and basically it's the energy of just going out. All right, we got to get in our planes. We got to go fight and fight the enemy, and it's really energetic, and it's a great way to start the concert. And usually the song is started off with the famous "We'll fight them on the beaches" speech, which really, the song itself amps you up. You're like, fuck the enemy. Once you go out there and be a psychopath on behalf of your country, it's such a great song. So anyway, that's and then from this, from the next album, which is Somewhere in Time, is Wasted Years, and this is a song that they will get played on the radio from time to time, and it's basically about the life of Iron Maiden on the road. That they basically, you kind of get lost in the moment, and you have to realize that these are the golden years. Don't waste your time worrying about the wasted years. Just realize that you're living in the golden years. This is the best time of your life, and it might not feel that way right now. But um, and it's about a lot of the struggles that they had on the road. And anybody who you can kind of extrapolate from that into your own life and think, and maybe I won't waste my time trying to reach for past glory. This could be it right now, and it doesn't seem like it because the clock is ticking just as fast as it was when things sucked. Really sucked. And you kind of look back on some of the day, and I think sometimes of the times that I had at the moment, I thought this is the worst my life ever got, and now I'm thinking like, oh, geez, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? And that's kind of trick that time is on you. So the last one I'm going to do, these are all like from the 80s and early 90s. Afterwards, I think that they go in a direction that isn't as fun. I don't think, not that they're not worthy of listening. These are something to get involved in. This is going to hook you. I'm essentially a drug dealer trying to give you, trying to sell you on this topic, and then get you in, and then you can go from weed to heroin. Up to you. But, the last one of these hits is Fear of the Dark. Now, if you've ever seen this, if you go see them live, go see them live. Go before somebody croaks or gets old and doesn't want to play anymore. Go see them. I don't care that you don't know any of the songs. You're going to see them and you're going to love them. It's an experience unto itself. And the song Fear of the Dark is the crowd participation in this is amazing. And it's basically about them watching horror movies, and after you watch a couple horror movies around, everything around you looks like it could be a potential murderer. You start seeing shadows on the wall and things like, and you start going crazy. And it's a really energetic song. It starts off slow. A lot of Iron Maiden songs start off slow and then they build, and then they might kind of sort of fade out. I think it's a really fun song. It's really great live. All of these songs that I've just mentioned so far are all great live songs. And Iron Maiden does tend to draw not just from their past hits, but some really obscure songs that they've done. As long as it doesn't kill Bruce's voice and it doesn't have a really sluggish feel on the concert, we'll play them. So the deep cuts, I'm going to get to these, and I don't know. Let's just say it like this: they don't play these a lot live, and if they do, just mark your calendar. This day I heard this song, because they might not come back. So the number one I would talk about is this. It's a segue. It's two songs that are segued into each other, and it's called "The Ides of March" and "Rathchild." And it's just sort of like this sort of. It's just like a very intro. It's almost like an overture, where they just sort of slowly, and it doesn't really have any. It's a build up. There's not a lot going on there, and then suddenly you're hit with Rathchild, which is basically about a guy who is looking for his father, maybe to kill him because he screwed over his mom. And this is I think this is the only song that I've chosen from the Paul Di'Anno, which is the first two albums. He was an incredible vocalist, perfect for them. I think they had a falling out. I don't know. Paul Di'Anno has lived a very messy life, and he was such a great singer. The Iron Maiden under there was very energetic, much more punk influenced than they were later. But although Steve Harris might fight you on that matter, but there's no denying the fact that they were much more energetic, and Paul doesn't have the range that Bruce does, but he definitely has the energy and that attitude. It's a great song. I think Rathchild is one of the best early songs they've done. The next one is Revelation. Now, I have heard different interpretations on this, and from what I've heard, that it is about Aleister Crowley, which obviously I think around the same time Ozzy Osbourne wrote a song called Mr. Crowley, and Jimmy Page was obsessed with him, even ended up buying Aleister Crowley's old house, Aleister Crowley was a sort of cultist, black magic kind of guy. Not really much is known about what he actually did, but lots of stories crop up, and it's a really good song. I think it's Bruce wrote the song, and it's just I love it. It's a bit of a long one, but it's still very good. The next song is my favorite song of all time. Not just Iron Maiden. I can't think of a song I love more than this one, and it's called Power Slave off the Power Slave album, which is why I have the Power Slave shirt on. And I love it. And it's basically the story from the point of view of an Egyptian pharaoh who lived his whole life just to try to control people. And now that he's dead, he's kind of wonders whether or not he had done the right thing. It has a lot of that sort of Egyptian, I would actually call it an Arabic style. You'll just listen to it, and the riff is very sort of evocative of an Arabian style um, music. Obviously, I think it's actually in its nature maybe interpreted by the French. This is how the Arabs do it, and then it just sort of evolves from there. I don't know that Arabian music actually does it like that. Anytime I've ever heard of it, it seems very stereotypical, but it's very well done in Power Slave. And the guitar, I would call it guitar solo, but it's way too long to be a solo. It has different movements within the solo. It starts, the song kind of cruises along, and then it sort of everything gets quiet, and he's just noodling on the guitar, and then suddenly the music starts picking up, and it gets really intense. And the guitar soloing is just, this is the best of them as far as I'm concerned. This is really where they knock it out of the park. And I can listen to this over and over. I must have heard this song literally thousands of times, and I've never gotten sick of it. It is my favorite song of all time. And so when somebody says this is my favorite song ever, and then you think, is it really? No, this is my favorite song ever. And if you want to do yourself a favor, you might really like it. It might not be your favorite, but you say, okay, I see where he's coming from. So the next one is Somewhere in Time. This is called Caught Somewhere in Time. From the Somewhere in Time album. If you look at the cover of the album, is amazing. I just listen to the whole CD or the whole record is just amazing, and it's fun because there are lots of it's this. I don't have it here because I'm at my parents' house, but it's just there are lots of little. It's all done. It's like a cartoon. There are lots of little things from the past of Iron Maiden. Basically, their favorite soccer football club, West Ham, or at least Steve's. Different parts of different songs. Like there's a song called 22 Acacia Avenue, and there's a sort of like a little marker. This is on Acacia Avenue in the middle of the street on the cover. And then there's a lot of it. The cover evokes uh, parts of, something like I would say Blade Runner. Um, Blade Runner meets Terminator, and it's kind of a fun cover. The song itself is really good. It sort of fuses in a bit of synthesizer in there, but not in a way that you would say with something uh, like Def Leppard, where it's like it's a little too heavy for me. It's a little too. They synthesize the guitar sound rather than putting in a synthesized keyboard, um, and I just love it. And it's kind of evokes this as like Bruce is kind of trying to entice you to go on a little trip through time. And where would you go? What would you do? That kind of thing. I love it. The whole album's great. This song to me is just, it's so fun, and it's a great way to start a great album. Now, the last song I'm going to do on here is, I would say, very controversial. Not because of the subject matter. It's because of where it comes from. So the song, I'll just jump in there, and you can hammer at me if you want. It's a song called "Sign of the Cross," and it's from the X Factor album. And this was a Blaze Bayley. So Bruce quit the band in '92 or '93, and did a solo career for about 6 or 7 years. And Iron Maiden were kind of surprised by this. They had to hire somebody, and they hired sort of a lesser known. I think they auditioned like hundreds of singers. Landed on Blaze Bayley, who, if these albums are not good, it is not Blaze Bayley's song. It's not his fault. It is. I think a lot of the band members were either tired from touring constantly for the last 15 years, or I think Steve, the bassist and the main songwriter, was going through a lot of personal problems, and perhaps the production and the songwriting lacked a bit of focus. But the Sign of the Cross, I love. And perhaps it's because this is one of my favorite books that it's based off of. It's called The Name of the Rose, and it's essentially um, a whodunit set in the Middle Ages in a monastery in northern Italy. And calling it a whodunit is kind of a bit of a slight on it, if you had to sum it up, essentially. But there are a lot of religious themes and philosophical themes of the Middle Ages. Basically, Middle Ages being up against the Renaissance, and it's all happening under this, with the Inquisition happening in the story. It's a great book. It's done by it was written by Umberto Eco, and the Sign of the Cross is actually it's I don't even know that it does justice to the book. I love the themes in it, and it doesn't. It just I can find myself singing it. It's actually quite long. I think it's about 10 minutes long, and it just for me, if I find myself singing along to something, and it's long after the song is over, I think it's probably good, as long as it's not annoying, like Barbie World, Barbie Girl living in a Barbie world. Um, that's something that gets stuck in your head and you don't like it. But this song, like, yeah, I'm gonna go listen to it, and it just kind of repeats itself. This desire to listen to it, and I really like it. I like the guitar work. He doesn't have the range that uh, that Paul had, or I mean that Bruce had, and he doesn't have the intensity that Paul has, but he has this sort of gravelly voice that really works on this song. So those are it. Those are the 5 hits, 5 deep cuts. If you're going to start with an album, I would start with Number of the Beast. This is the first Bruce album, and it's got Hallowed Be Thy Name on there. It's got a bunch of other songs like Run to the Hills, uh, and I would the Number of the Beast song itself. It's a good place to start. It's not my favorite album, but it's a really good introduction to Iron Maiden. And I would say for a deeper cut, go to Somewhere in Time. I love it. Actually, I like Power Slave a bit more, but Somewhere in Time is just, I think it just kind of gets buried under the mountain of work that they have. I know there are tons of songs on there that I could have put on here, but I kind of limit myself to 5 songs that everyone should know, 5 songs that you might not know, and then 2 albums. One that's a famous album and one that's a lesser famous album. So my own constraints have stopped the conversation on other songs. And these are all my own personal decisions. I am very passionate about Iron Maiden, and I can't wait to see them coming up in, I think it's October. They're going to be in New Jersey, so I will be there. Look for me. All right. See you soon. Bye.